Hey there, what's up everyone? I am Joe Sibilia, and this is the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show episode number 74. Now, on this episode, my guest is Dave Alvin. Dave is the lead singer for the band White Trash, which you may remember from their probably about 1990 they came out, and they had the hit Apple Pie. They also had another hit off their debut album called The Crawl. Dave and I discussed what it was like for a funk rock band in New York at the time and the antics that they had to do to help pull people into the shows, as well as their debut album, what led to the band split, and then also the reunion of White Trash. White Trash is currently creating new music. That's fantastic news. So all this and more on this episode of the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show. And hey, if you like this show, please make sure to go follow us on social media at R&R Coffee Show. And follow us and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify or wherever you listen to this podcast. I appreciate you listening. Be a good person. Thank you. Hey everyone, it's Joe with the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show. I wanted to take a quick minute before we get on to our conversation with this week's guest and tell you about Anchor.fm. As you may know, here at the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show, we use Anchor.fm for our podcast hosting. Why do we use Anchor, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. For one, it's easy. Anchor's creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Number two, after you're done editing your podcast, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And the best part about using Anchor for your podcast hosting is you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership right from the start. Oh, and did I mention it's all free? Anchor is everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So go download the free app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And don't forget to let them know the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show sent you.
Hello?
Dave, you there?
Yes. You hear me?
Yeah, I got you. What's up, buddy?
Not much. How are you?
I'm doing good, doing good. Hey, I got to ask you, the first thing I want to ask you real quick is about your White Trash logo on your website.
Yes.
You're a New York Mets fan, I take it.
Yes. For better, for worse, yes.
I saw that. I was like, wait a minute there. So you must be a huge fan.
You know, we're from Queens.
Right.
I grew up at Shea Stadium before the new stadium. So the Mets are, we're all Mets fans on the team. And that's, certainly not the greatest time to be a Mets fan, but, it rarely is. And you take your lumps and you can't switch teams. We're not front runners.
That's right. I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, and I've been a fan since the orange and white uniforms. So
yeah, I love those uniforms.
Yeah, we've had some issues, but we're doing all right now. So
yeah.
So how you been?
Good, I'm still alive, and I guess in this day and age, that's a good thing.
Right. Have you been pretty healthy through this whole thing?
Yes, I have been lucky with that. Had some friends and people that I know that weren't as lucky, but thank God. How about you? You did all right through this?
I got it actually. I had it back in February.
Oh, and I hope it wasn't too bad for you.
Well, it put me down. I missed about a month of work.
Yeah, that's not good.
It got me, but luckily I recovered and got my shot, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
So you were saying you were born in Queens. You grew up there, but were you born there?
Oh yeah. We were all the core of everybody in the band was from Queens, within a block of each other, not even like different neighborhoods. Like I lived on one side of the street, and Ethan and Aaron lived on the other side of the street. And the original drummer, Andy Buzz Lang, lived right around the corner from me. So we literally just walk across the street.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So when you were growing up, what got you into music? Was your family into music, or how'd that happen?
Not so much. My great uncle that I'm related to in a marriage my uncle married the daughter of Doc Pomus, and I don't know if you know who Doc Pomus is, but he wrote Viva Las Vegas and Why Must I Be a Teenager in Love, and like 100 really famous songs, you know, and he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right.
So I didn't grow up with him, but he was somebody that was actually helped me out along the way with advice.
Mm-hmm.
But getting into music, it was to get laid.
Right.
You know, for me, my neighborhood, everyone in my neighborhood was a musician, everybody, because at that time, and they were good musicians, like guys, you know, who listened to can play that stuff. And you know, Ethan was that way too. He was older than us, and you know, he was originally a drummer, and then he became, you know, one of the best guitar players in the world soon after. But you know, initially, you know, the heavy metal rock scene of the 80s, I mean, you know, for a 17-year-old kid, that was like going from high school straight into a porno movie.
Right. Right.
So it was all about the, you know, in those days for me, you know, looking up to guys like, you know, Motley Crue, that whole, you know, live fast, die young kind of thing. So I was really all about living that, and the guys in my band luckily were really good musicians, so somehow we balanced all that out.
Right. So did you start off singing, or did you play an instrument?
Well, I've always played guitar. Back then I was like a very, you know, I just power chords and whammy bar, you know.
Right.
But I wrote a lot of riffs that wound up being white trash songs, and kind of played guitar more as a songwriter than, you know, a soloist or anything. And so I started with the guitar, and the first band I was with the guy around the corner, Andy, and one day he just, I don't know if I was like singing along to, you know, a mixtape or something, and he was like, you know what, you could probably sing. And since it was hard to find a singer, I was like, yeah, you think so? And so I just started doing it, you know, at that point. And then you find out, of course, that, you know, the singers get all the girls.
Right.
Stuff. And then you're like, wait a minute, like, why the hell was I trying to learn an instrument?
So did it come naturally to you? I mean, or did you have to really work on it?
You know, you know, over the years I did work on it, but I think, you know, my voice was in a range where I could sing high, which in those days was a big thing, whether it was, you know, doing Motley Crue or Iron Maiden covers, you know, Judas Priest, whatever, you know, you had to get high in those days. And I was able to do that early on, you know, with falsetto and stuff. But, you know, starting there, and then just, you know, singing now for, wow, I mean, you know,
for a long time,
40 years or something like that. It's like, you know, you learn how to sing or you lose your voice at some point, you know?
Right. So with the influences, like you were just saying, the Motley Crues and, you know, Judas Priest and all that, where did the funk part of white trash come from?
So it was a couple of, so, you know, I always listened to like blues stuff, and I always really liked Albert King, and he always had horns, and one of our favorite movies growing up was the Blues Brothers, you know?
Yes.
And back in those days, you know, there was a much more obvious, well, I don't know if it was more, but, you know, all the guys that you were into, you know, I'm a big Jimi Hendrix fan. And, you know, all the guys that influenced guys like Jimi Hendrix, you know, Elmore James, you know, Albert King, you know, there were a lot of like very easy connections to make with blues. And then blues kind of becomes R&B and soul and funk. And, you know, so the Blues Brothers sort of had that whole balance. Plus they had the humor that we were trying to have in our band. Right. So like the Blues Brothers was probably like our biggest influence as far as getting like, you know, R&B and the horns involved.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now you guys didn't start out like that though, did you?
No, we were like, at first, So me, Ethan, and Aaron, the first gig me, Ethan, and Aaron played was at Aaron's bar mitzvah, literally.
Oh, geez.
And we have that on video. So it was like Aaron was 13, I was like 15, and Ethan was probably like 17, something like that. And we were playing Living After Midnight and Breaking the Law.
Nice.
And we used to do covers and play like the high school battle of the bands. And but we always like put on a good show, and we were into Van Halen and Motley Crue, and then and Aerosmith, and later Guns N' Roses when that came out. That was a big deal,
Sure.
So we were like pretty much a straight up rock band, but everybody had other stuff that they listened to that we would bring in, So like for me, again, it was like blues and Prince and Parliament, that kind of stuff I listened to outside of all the heavy metal stuff. And, like Ethan listened to, progressive rock, like ELP and stuff like that. And, Aaron and Mike, at a little bit more down the road got into like the Chili Peppers and stuff. And that's, why the rhythm section has, a similar sound to that.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to bring in a lot of influences, things ranging from Frank Zappa, to Venom. You know what I mean? We were like just filming music, because in those days, I don't think music was so rigidly categorized where like you just like metal or like we listened to everything and we tried to steal from everybody.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, and you had back then you had you listened to the radio, you would hear Def Leppard, you would hear Jay Giles Band,
right,
Hall & Oates,
exactly.
all in the same station.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we were kind of a product of that time, is that like it's all music. Like the heavy metal part, like I said, was just like being in ancient Rome or being a Viking or something, you know what I mean? Just trading and pillaging, and the party lifestyle of 80s metal was everything. But musically, we were into a lot of other stuff,
I see. So when did you guys form with the core group?
So there were different versions of me, Ethan, and Aaron playing together. So the first band was called Blade.
Blade.
And and we were a cover band. And then we became Wired. And then again, we were doing pretty much just covers and stuff. But in that band, we started attempting to write songs. And, in between, they would go off and do something else. I would go off and do something else. So finally, when we got back together again, then we became White Trash.
And when was this?
So White Trash probably started in like 1987 or something like that.
Okay.
And that was with the original drummer, Andy. And then when he left the band, we got Mike, who we went to high school with. Uh-huh. And the horn players went to the high school. So we've always been like local, recruiting people we know locally.
Right.
And so that's about when it started.
So it sounds like, I mean, as a local band, that seems like it's a pretty big production.
Yeah, well, so we used to always try to do different stuff at shows because we were like, a big live band. So, originally I used to like smash TVs on stage and stuff. And then, and we used to give money to the crowd and buy White Castle hamburgers and hand them out and like rip up stuffed animals. Like, we were always trying to do something, out of the ordinary. We took it in the musical direction, and for a while we had backup singers. We had 3 girls called the Love Dogs in the band.
Uh-huh.
And that was kind of cool, but like, honestly, I think those girls drank more than they sang on stage. But, again, looking at the Blues Brothers thing and stuff, we were talking about like, initially we were just talking about like, hey, maybe it'd be cool to put horns on a song or two, like how like bands like Aerosmith would do that,
Right.
And then Aaron was in band class with the guys who wound up being on our horn section. And once we brought them in and we played a couple of times, it was kind of evident that we were onto something with that we really could incorporate them. And since, we were all friends and local, it was doable,
Yeah,
and
sure.
so we just kept putting more horns in the songs, and we were kind of already headed in a direction where we were incorporating more like funk type stuff into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it all kind of just came together, and we just realized that, like, okay, we're onto something with this,
Mm-hmm. And then how quick did you guys get noticed?
Well, we had a good following even prior to the horns. In those days, there were so many clubs in New York, but also in Queens. So in Queens, like, we played places like Lemoore East and Gun Club and stuff. And we were like the best draw for any like Queens band, like basically. So like any Queens venue that wanted us, like we just had tons of friends that came to see us and everything. And then, we were putting on a good show and doing a professional thing, which, not everybody came across as very professional in those days.
Right.
And so, we had value as an act. And, some of the people who owned, the Gun Club, like Tommy Gunn was the booker at the Cat Club in the city. And, Nicky Camp, who also was from Gun Club and recently Blackthorn 51, he did the Limelight. So, we started getting into all those bigger venues. And again, we would bring a ton of people to any show, and our people drank, Right. So it was like, if you brought us in, it was just economics, like, we're going to make money, And so in the city at that time, it was very like glam, and I say poserish, not as like a nasty comment, because I was a poser for a long time too, but we came in and we were like, it was sort of like Bad News Bears, versus, Faster Pussycat in the venue, you know what I mean? And we just bring a street attitude and we didn't take shit from anybody, and, and we just hoard ourselves out, and we quite often outdrew those other bands,
Right.
So that's kind of, how we got into that scene.
So how did you get the attention though of who signed you?
Well, Elektra signed us to a record deal.
Right.
We actually did it backwards. We got a publishing deal before we got the record deal. So first we were signed by EMI to a publishing deal that was contingent on them getting us a record deal.
Okay. So and then you got your record deal with Elektra.
Well, in a roundabout way they did. So what happened was they paid for us to do demos, and then they paid for us to do a video. And the video turned out to be the Apple Pie video. So we made that video before we ever had a record deal.
So it was the same video? Yeah. Oh, okay.
And if you watch the video, you'll notice it's a different version of the song than the album, because it's our demo.
Okay.
And so we already had made Apple Pie and the video and everything before we got signed. And, everybody really likes that video and that song. So it was kind of easy to market the band to record labels, because it was like basically like, well, here's a hit. Like, We're ready to go, So we had a bunch of people interested. And Q Prime became our management company. And, Q Prime still manages Metallica. At that time they were doing Def Leppard and Queensryche and like everybody. They're like one of the most successful management teams in history, probably,
Mm-hmm.
And they got interested in what we were doing. And that opened like a lot of doors. And they had Metallica on Elektra already signed there. So they kind of wanted us to go there because they knew the people.
Mm-hmm.
They had a pull there. And, so they brought us to Elektra. Like we had like Columbia interested, and who else? Like Mechanic Records and Hollywood Records, which became like SBK Records. So we had a few people already interested in us, but then they got Elektra interested in us, and we wound up going with Elektra because of our manager's relationship with them.
Do you think that was a good choice, looking back on it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Elektra was always very good to us. And, you know, the issues we've had really haven't been because of anybody else.
Right.
In my opinion, you know, it's, you know, we got a lot of great opportunities, and, you know, we had a record deal that was a very good record deal. You know, at the time it was like, you know, like a really good record deal. I mean,
yeah.
And they supported the product and, you know, gave us everything we needed to succeed. So I do think Elektra was a really good record company to be signed to. It's just they're gone now.
Yeah. Now, you know, your guys' sound with the funk rock combination, I'm trying to think back of the bands that were around in like 1990, and I can't think of too many that had that sound. And, you know, your Chili Peppers were there. Maybe Bang Tango to a certain extent. You know, they had some funk in there. But Extreme a little bit. But there really wasn't a lot of bands that had that style. I mean, was there a plan for you guys as far as marketing you? Like, how was that going to work with the bands that were out?
Well, I think I mean, you bring that up, and interestingly, that's the most difficult part of the band, even today, is because it's an unusual mix of things. But I know, you know, for us back then, we wanted to be different. We didn't, you know, we started off like just trying to be Aerosmith or Motley Crue or whatever, but we, you know, wanted to be something unique, you know, and so we found that, you know, by bringing funk in. And again, it's not easy for everybody you got to have really good players to play that stuff right.
Yeah, definitely.
So I was fortunate enough, you know, to be playing with people that could handle that, you know. So it wasn't like gimmicky funk, you know what I mean? Like sometimes people throw in a funk riff and it's either good or bad, but the point is it's kind of hokey in a certain way. So like we tried, even though we were a bunch of white guys from Queens, we tried to be legit. You know, we tried. I don't know that we were always 100% successful, but we were going, you know, we were listening to the right stuff. We were, you know, had the right players, the right gear. And it just somehow to us, it made sense combining that. Because in a way, like, again, even in a much different way, if you look at like somebody like Prince, he combined rock and funk.
Sure.
He had a more distinct Minneapolis thing going on, but you know, like rock music and funk do go together. It's just not all the time, but we saw it, and once we started hitting, you know, and connecting on it a little bit, you know, it was obvious that you know there was something there.
Yeah.
Working on, you know.
So then you record your album, and then who did you guys go out with on that album?
Well, we really toured by ourselves most of the time. You know, in the early days, like when we played clubs before we got some, we played with like Bang Tango, like you mentioned before, and Mike Monroe and stuff like that. But when we went out on the road, we just were like headlining clubs, you know?
Okay.
And to be honest, our management was worried about putting us on with bigger acts.
Why?
Because we were like troublemakers. So like we opened up for Dweezil Zappa at the Cat Club in like I don't know, like 1990, let's say. And at that time, Dweezil Zappa was like trying to be Eddie Van Halen.
Right.
And I mean, he's a very talented guitar player, obviously, but we were supposed to open for him at the Cat Club, which is a place we played all the time, which is like a legendary New York place, and we sort of felt like that was our turf. And Dweezil Zappa came in, and he was like came across, and I don't think he's the same kind of person now, but at the time he came across as like some spoiled rich kid. And he like literally in front of the stage had 20 guitars roped off, just sitting there, like showing off his guitar collection or something. And they wouldn't let us do a sound check. And it was like he was just pulling some kind of star treatment there.
Uh-huh.
And we were like, this is kind of fucked up, whatever. So we went on and we didn't have a sound check. And come out first song, we do the crawl. And Aaron's bass amp isn't working. So we're like, fuck. So we're like sitting there and like, you know, everybody's got flashlights looking at his amp. And I'm standing on the stage and then I just kind of turned to the crowd and I was like, you know, Dweezil Zappa's a fucking dick. And I went on like a long tirade.
Oh, geez.
About what I didn't like about Dweezil Zappa. And so what happened was of course, the audience was there for Dweezil Zappa. And so like, I'm like, you know, Dweezil sucks. Boo! Boo! Like, you know, but then we get the amp fixed and we start playing. We do another song where there's a break in between the song. And then I'm like, you know what else I don't like about Dweezil Zappa? Boo! 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 But as the night goes on, I'm making fun of, you know, he did a TV show with his sister and Cindy Williams from Laverne and Shirley. So I was making fun of that show. I was like, Frank's spinning in his grave with this fucking kid. The funny thing is, by the end of the set, like nobody was booing anymore, you know?
Right. Well, maybe you won them over, or they were tired of hearing it.
Well, one or the other, right? And then but on the side of the stage, like all Dweezil's guys are standing there giving us the stink eye. Not Dweezil, he was just hiding in the dressing room or something. And so we finished our set, and then the bouncer or stage guy came up to me and he said, hey, you can't go backstage. They don't want you to go backstage. So I had to like leave, like, you know, come off the stage and walk through the audience, right. You know? So I was like, whatever. So I go walking through the audience and this dude comes up and he like grabs me. He was like, hey dude, I just got one thing to tell you. He goes, I came here tonight to see Dweezil Zappa. And then he goes, but I heard what you said. And I'm going home. The guy shook my hand and he left.
You made a new fan.
Well, that to me is my greatest accomplishment in life. Was like turning a Dweezil. Anyway, that's a long story, but the point was after that, our managers were like, what the fuck are you doing?
Right,
you know,
right.
We're trying to get you like opening gigs, and we were like, fuck him, he's a dick. So they didn't really like trust us because we were like, you know, you know, the Beverly Hillbillies to them. Like, you know, they didn't know what to do with us because we were just like party animals and we were just like, fuck everybody, like kind of, or I don't know if everybody was, but so they were very nervous about like having us play with other people. And, you know, there were other instances of things like that. So pretty much we toured by ourselves and we had a great time doing it.
Yes, it sounds like it. Have you ever spoke to Dweezil?
No, I mean, you know, he is a really talented guy, and like he's doing all his father shit now, and he does it really well. I mean, and I've seen him, you know, like anybody else has seen him, and he seems like a good dude. I mean, he did. All I can say is at that time, the way they came into that venue was like off-putting, but yeah, he seems like a cool dude to me. So I don't really have any beef with him. I doubt he even remembers, like, right. You know what I mean?
You should tell him that story if you ever cross paths.
Yeah, and then he'll punch me.
So I caught you guys live once at it was a radio event in Florida called Livestock.
Oh yeah,
I think it was Livestock 2, maybe. I'm not sure what.
So yeah,
but yeah, I remember catching you guys there.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, those shows were always great down there.
Yeah, that was a good one. I think Soundgarden did it that year too,
I think so.
On a different night, not the same night as us.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. So here you are. You got your record deal. You're not allowed to tour with anybody. So do you think maybe the album could have been bigger if you got on a big tour?
Well, I mean, honestly, that wasn't really the issue because it wasn't like we were banned from doing that. So really the issue with our band is that by the time we got signed, everybody really wasn't getting along, you know?
Already?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, we got something going on in the scene, and we were doing well, and we had people interested in stuff. And there was a point where me and Ethan were thinking of going off and doing something, and Mike and Aaron were thinking of going off and doing something else, like me and Ethan were talking more like straight up rock, just doing something, and I know Aaron and Mike were interested in doing something a little, more chili pepperish or whatever.
Mm.
And then we got this publishing deal, and it was like, oh, well, what kind of idiot would jump at a sign, getting a record deal,
Mm.
But there was a lot of a lot of beef between everybody. Really them and me,
them against you.
So, the thing that held us back is that, we toured the first record. We had a commitment to do the second record, and we did very well with the first record, even not really opening for people and stuff. And, but before we even started talking about doing the second record, everybody quit except for me. So, Ethan, really was never into having the horns in the band. Mm. And he was much more into like kind of putting a band together, like in those days, something like Badlands with Jakey Lee, like, he was a really good guitar player, and he wanted to be like, have a project that was really more about him and his guitar playing. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, it was just where he was coming from. He wasn't really into doing all the funk stuff. Like, he thought it kind of got played out, and he didn't really
that's like
do it anymore.
That's
so
like
he was
total opposites.
I'm going to do something a little bit more like straight ahead rock,
mm-hmm.
heavy metal, And then, Aaron was his brother, and he was kind of like, well, if Ethan's not going to do it, me and Mike were playing with this other dude, and, our heart's not really in this. So suddenly I'm sitting in the car with these guys, and I'm like, okay, like, how does this work? Now there's just me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then Aaron and Mike started this other project, and they took the horn section, and I'm like, all right, well, there's like literally just me, right? So we had a conversation about it, and they said, look, basically like, we're leaving the band, if you want to keep the band going, you can do that. And so I did, and recruited more people from my neighborhood into the band.
Stayed in the neighborhood.
Other guys. So I got Craig, who was friends with Ethan and had been they were roommates for a while. And Craig actually toured with us as Ethan's guitar tech for a while. So he was almost like the understudy.
Right.
And, they had similar backgrounds, and we brought him in, and Eric and Dave, and then Brendan, who was the original trumpet player, left playing with Mike and Aaron and came on board, and we put together, the second version of White Trash. And then we had to convince Elektra that, like, this is still the same thing,
Yeah. Now, did you ever consider maybe, not going under White Trash, changing the name?
Yes, I did. But the reality of the situation was that White Trash had a record deal,
and had a little bit of a following going on.
And there was no assurance that if I went and did another project that I'd have that, right?
Right.
So it was really just a business decision at that point that, like, plus, I had devoted a lot of time and energy, and I didn't want to quit. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I kind of felt like, well, I'm not like kicking people out of the band, you know what I mean? And on some ego trip, it's just their heart is elsewhere. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like a football team, right? Like if the guy's contract's up and he wants to go somewhere else, right? Well, that's how you guys got Tom Brady, right? So,
right.
You know what I'm saying? All's fair in love, war, music, everything. So, I felt like, well, they're going to go on and do something else. And, I'm not done with this yet. Like, you know what I mean? So, so we just buckled down and went on to round two.
Right. Now, the first album, the self-titled album, I thought was a fantastic album. Like, all the songs on there, I can't think of a bad song.
Thank you.
And The Crawl got used on that Jon Stewart show, right?
Yes, right.
How did that happen?
Well, so Jon Stewart originally was on MTV, and in those days, MTV didn't pay any royalties because their whole argument was like, well, you know, we can make you a star by playing your video, right? Which was true.
Yeah, right.
But they didn't pay royalties. I mean, years later, they had to pay royalties, but at that time, they didn't. And so Jon Stewart had a talk show on MTV, and Jon Stewart apparently liked that song. And they just said, oh, okay, then we'll use that. Like, they never cleared it with us or anything. They just did it, you know? But which was cool. We didn't have a beef with it because all of a sudden, you know, we had Apple Pie on, you know, on a Buzzbin clip. And then Jon Stewart's coming on with our song. Like, you know, we were like, this is all good. You know what I mean?
That's great.
So what happened with that is that then Jon Stewart, after that, went to Paramount to do his TV show, and EMI wouldn't work out a deal with him for The Crawl. So I wrote Jon Stewart another song that was very similar to The Crawl for his TV show on UPN 9, and then that, you know, so I had two songs with the Jon Stewart show.
Okay. So then you record your second album. What was the second album? What's the title?
Well, it's COCK, which spells something.
Right.
It was a joke that went over everybody's head. Now everybody gets it, but it's funny.
Was that whose idea was that? Yours?
Yes, or yes, what? Like, what does it mean?
That was your idea, I guess.
Yeah.
So now, how did that album go?
It was actually an amazing experience. There were certain things that were not working in our favor. But that's, you know, for me, that was the best experience making a record, which is not a knock on the guys that I played with prior and who I also play with now, you know, because we still play together. But that was like a important moment for me personally in my life, because I had to become more of a musician, and I had to really fight to get that record made. And, you know, at that time, the whole music scene changed, you know, because Nirvana and everything came out. So like everybody talks about, the whole scene changed. It went much more in the grunge direction. And we were like this real oddball product at that time because, you know, we never even 100% fit in with the hair band thing because we weren't really playing straight up, you know, 80s metal, you know, and we weren't like a power ballad band or anything. So it was always kind of weird how we were a part of that scene anyway. But then when the grunge scene came in, it was like anybody who was part of that hair metal scene was suddenly, you know, not cool anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was very tough to make that record and to get it done and to get it out and released. It was a very long process. But it was a great experience. It was definitely like probably the best moment of my life, even though it was nowhere near as successful as the first album. It was a much better experience in a lot of different ways for me. And it's cool because that record has like a really big cult following amongst our fans. Like I said, there's no comparison. The first record is like the record that defines us.
Right.
But that record was like, you know, it's like an oddball. Like I'm into like, you know, B movies and, you know, and B sides of albums and stuff. And it was kind of, that was the inspiration for that album. It's like, we weren't really looking for hits or anything like that. It was like, you know, and it came out, you know, pretty much exactly the way we wanted it to be. It was just a very strange product at that time, you know, when you're competing against Soundgarden and Nirvana and stuff. We didn't fit into that scene. There was no way to even pretend we were part of that scene. You know what I mean?
Right. So did that album get support from the label after it was released?
Yeah, we toured that one just like we did on the first one.
Okay.
We actually got to open for Kiss.
Hey,
at the Concrete Convention.
did you cause any trouble?
Yes.
With Kiss?
I did. Not with Kiss.
Oh, okay.
but we trashed a hotel room and and we had to pay like $5,000 or something because it was special wallpaper or something. I don't know, something like that.
Oh, geez.
But no, we never cleaned up our act in that. We were always, assholes, breaking things, and like I always like I don't know if you watched WKRP in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
They had that one episode with that band, The Scum of the Earth.
I don't remember it. I'd have to go back and look.
And but they have them come on, and they're like these like refined English gentlemen talking, but they're just burning everything and like trashing everything. They throw somebody out a window. Things like that, and like Chris Holmes in that Metal movie where he's floating around in the pool drinking vodka.
The Metal years?
Yes, those things made great impressions on me.
Oh, jeez.
So I always loved the self-destructive rock star lifestyle, just breaking things. And, in those days, I don't condone it, but I mean, in those days, I was certainly some guy drinking and driving like fucking maniac. And
yeah.
So it was like I said, we really bought into that Motley Crue, live fast, die young kind of thing. The only problem is we didn't die young. So
well, that's a good thing. We
had a lot of stuff to clean up after that.
So were you like that outside the band? Like just as normal Dave, not in the band? Have you always been that way?
Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't an act. I was just fucking out of my mind at that time.
Yeah.
And, I don't really regret that because, to be honest, nothing would have happened if I wasn't out of my mind.
Sure.
Because we had a lot of the odds stacked against us every step of the way. And the fact that we were able to sell it and get signed, a lot of it had to do with me whoring myself out in the club scene. And you got to be a little crazy to do this stuff. Now, I'm sure there are many examples of where I took it too far, but
we won't talk
I got to be honest. I have zero regrets about that.
Yeah, sure. So after the second album, that was it for a while, right?
Yeah. Well, so we did the second record, and by the end of the tour, like I said, we were touring, and then you kind of going to like smaller venues and weren't quite getting the same turnouts and stuff. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall, like, this is a tough sell right now with everything that's going on in music. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not in any way putting down like grunge or any of that. There's great music there too. But we just were like, you know what I mean? Like my style of singing was very like high and, yeah,
it was different.
Suddenly they're singing, in a much lower register or with harmonies, and it was a different kind of singing. It's beautiful singing, and honestly, I just kind of looked at it and I was like, I don't really see how we fit into this. It's not fitting in with this, and I just kind of got the sense, from watching other bands too, the bands that were playing like, the cool clubs like Lemoore. Now those clubs were gone, and now they were playing other venues like in Queens, like, Castle Heights, which was really just a bar with a stage in the back,
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of looked at it and I said, I think this whole thing has probably just kind of run its course. You know what I mean? And I kind of didn't really feel like I just kind of felt like, I came, I conquered, I kicked some ass, but I think, it's time to do something else.
Yeah.
And I just stopped doing it. Those guys all, kept playing in different bands and stuff, but I kind of just went off and did a lot of other stuff.
Did you stay in music or did you just completely leave it?
I completely left it pretty much. The last thing I did right after like White Trash was over was when I was talking about Jon Stewart had the second show.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually paid me a lot of money to write a different version of The Crawl. And I did that pretty much by myself. Mike came in and played drums. And we had what was cool about that, we had the Uptown Horns from the Rolling Stones play the horns.
Nice.
And, yeah. And and it came out really good. And if that Jon Stewart show had become the hit that his next show became with the Daily Show,
right?
That would have been amazing. But that show only lasted about a year and a half, so it was really good royalties and stuff for like a year and a half. So it was sort of like my retirement plan. I felt at that time, like, all right, I'm going to take this movie. I moved to Florida. Like I literally retired. Like I was just drinking and chilling out, sitting on a porch every day.
Breaking a TV every now and then?
What's that?
Breaking a TV every now and then?
No, I think at that point I had calmed down a little bit. But
where in Florida did you move?
Tampa area.
Okay, that's where I'm from. I grew up there.
Yeah, so I lived in Tampa, and then I lived in Tarpon Springs.
Okay.
And that was cool. And then there's some like lost years in there. I was like doing filmmaking, and then I went back to school, and there was just a lot of different stuff happened in there, but none of it had anything to do with music.
Right.
So like I lived in and then I moved to California, like San Francisco. I was out there for a few years. I got my master's degree. And then when I came back to New York, I ran into Aaron, and some dude we knew asked if we would want to do some reunion show. And so I was like, yeah, that'd be cool. And then, so we did this reunion show. And then I suddenly realized, like, wow, I really missed this. Like, this is what I should be doing. What was I doing? You know what I mean? Sort of like that.
Right.
So then we got back together, and since then we've put out 2 more records. We're working on another one now
with the original lineup.
Well, Ethan passed away a few years back. He had a heart attack. But we had gone between Ethan and Craig, who was on the second record, because, like I said, we all grew up together. So it was never like, we went out and just got different people. It was all people. We were all friends. Like everybody in my second band knew the people in the first band. It wasn't like, so, for us, it's like a, kind of like a family affair.
Yeah.
So Craig and Ethan were both playing. Aaron came back in, and he stayed in. Mike was doing it for a while. And then Dave, the second drummer, came in for a while. And now it's it's a much bigger White Trash, because there's like, it's sort of like how Parliament, I don't know how much you know about Parliament, but that whole P-Funk thing, they've got like hundreds of musicians involved, and we're sort of like moved in that direction, where we've had like lots of different horn players, although right now we have the original horn players. We've had a few different drummers in the mix, and this guy Twan that I play with in another project has played some White Trash shows. Now we have a new guitar player, Mark Pincus, who was in another project I did called Bone Monkey. And so, yeah, I mean, if you added up all the people in White Trash, it's
quite a few.
Yeah, you could like fill a gymnasium or something,
Right. So when you're writing songs, are you the main songwriter?
I mean, I, as far as percentage-wise, I'm the main songwriter. In general, me and Aaron split the duties. Like, we're like with lots of we have a unique relationship, and we write really well together, I think. Mm-hmm. And we're on the same wavelength, so it's kind of easy to write with Aaron. And Aaron writes a ton of material too. Like, he's got a side project, so like we have tons of material to work on. But, I always like working on stuff with Aaron. I think what we do complements each other really well.
Okay. And so you said you're writing some stuff now, and that's for a full-length album?
Yeah, we have enough right now for a full-length record. Demoed a bunch of stuff. We're actually trying to come up with the best strategy of how to do this now. Mm-hmm. Because obviously nowadays CDs don't seem to be as important. So, it's more like the medium we're trying to figure out. We're doing vinyl, or we just doing digital.
Right. Vinyl seems to be pretty popular right now, I think.
Yeah, I kind of want to do some vinyl. And then, also looking at potentially re-releasing some old stuff on vinyl. So, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff going on and side projects, but we do have a bunch of material together that's ready to go. So it's really just doing it at this point.
Yeah. Now, are you going to release it on your own, or are you going to try and shop it around?
We're probably going to do it on our own. There's some people that we've talked to that are interested in it. It's just the way the music industry is now. You have to kind of weigh out, obviously, if a major label was going to come in and give you the kind of deal we had back in 1990, relative to today's time, you take it, because you'd be nuts not to take it,
Right.
But, record companies now don't offer those kind of deals, number one. And number two, they want all your publishing, they want your merchandise.
Right.
And because it's harder to monetize music, with streaming and all that. So, to be honest, I don't know how interested we are in working with anybody, because when we've done the last couple of records, we did them on our own. And we've had good success relative, to the budgets we've had.
Yeah.
So unless somebody's going to come in and really do something that we can't do ourselves,
Yeah, you might as well just do it yourself.
It's debatable. I know people argue both ways, but it's hard if you've got to give up all your merchandising and publishing all to one person. It just seems like that's not a good deal,
Right. So can we expect to hear a single soon?
I'm sorry, you dropped out. What'd you say?
Can we expect to hear a single pretty soon?
Yeah, we have stuff recorded, and there. I'll just say we have a Christmas song that we wrote.
A Christmas song?
A Christmas song.
Wow.
So, I'm not sure if we can get it together by this Christmas, because that's kind of quick. And again, it's obviously not a traditional Christmas song, but so we would like to try to get that out for Christmas, sort of as like a free download kind of thing, just to, put it out there.
Right.
But the whole project's gonna, it won't be done by Christmas. There's like no way. But the material's there, and as they say, build it and they will come.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear that news. So I'm a big fan of the band. So
thanks, man.
Yeah. So, well, I guess we don't know yet where you would be able to get that, because you don't know what's going to happen with the release of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, anything we put out now is, on iTunes, Amazon, all that stuff,
Sure.
Vinyl, I mean, the whole thing, I think, is with doing vinyl. We haven't done that.
Yeah.
So that it's like the amount of time you need to actually have vinyl printed, and then, if you're shipping vinyl, it's a lot different than shipping a CD and stuff. So
yeah, lead time on vinyl
like
is...
a label or a distributor might be of value to us,
Yeah, lead time on vinyl right now is outrageous.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you can do like short run stuff, but the quality's not as good. So, I want to do it right.
Sure.
So, it's like I said, if somebody wanted to come in and take care of all of that for us, then we'd probably be looking to make a deal on that. But
yeah. All right. Now, the first album, is that not available on vinyl?
It was, but it was only available on vinyl in Europe.
Okay.
So there's like a very limited amount of pressings of that, and like we all have a copy. And I know a few people that I've been in touch with, like fans and friends, have found copies on eBay and stuff like that. So there's some copies of that out there, but it not enough, for the demand for it. So
yeah.
That's why we were thinking, it might be cooler to release it on vinyl.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, most of just for me personally, I mean, if I buy something now, it's a vinyl. Like I won't buy a CD or something. I'll buy a download just because it's convenient. But, But as far as a physical product, I'll buy the vinyl.
Yeah, totally. That's what we were thinking too. Like, release it on vinyl, and then buy the vinyl and you get the free downloads.
Yeah.
So when you're in your car or whatever,
Right.
you can stream it.
Are you a vinyl collector?
I have a lot of vinyl. I don't really go out of my way to collect it like a lot of people do now.
Mm-hmm.
But I still have a lot of vinyl, from growing up. And I actually have a bunch of Craig's vinyl sitting in front of me. And he has a really good record collection. So
yeah,
I have a good collection, but I know nowadays there's like people who are like super collectors, with like rooms full of vinyl. I don't have that.
Yeah, that would suck to have to move, wouldn't it, with all that?
Well, yeah, that's why I have Craig's stuff, because he moved to California, and he couldn't take it with him, so I have his turntable and his old stereo and his vinyl.
Yeah. All right, Dave. Well, listen, man, I appreciate you taking time to have this little conversation with me this evening.
Oh, no problem. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. And I'll definitely look for new White Trash to come out. And yeah, all is good.
Cool.
All right, buddy.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
All right, man. You take care.
All right. You too.
We'll see you.
All right.
That's all for this week. Join us next week for another episode of the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show podcast. Available on all your favorite podcast listening platforms.